morning. Is everyone awake and aware and ready to build that land we just sang about? Yeah? I love that part of the chorus where we're just a shall roll down like waters, peace like an ever-flowing stream. I love that because it does what the words say, but it's really hard to sing in one breath, huh? That's why you saw me keep doing this to the choir. I'm like, take a breath and breathe through. It's beautiful, and it feels good to sing until you get to the end of it, and then it's a little dizzy-making. Well, last week was a wonderful gift for us all, wasn't it? Reverend Paul was officially ordained as a minister of this incredible place, and we adore him. And he gave a talk which told us that we are all ministers within this life. He inspired us to reach out to those around us along the way, right? Do you remember what happened the week before that? Anybody? When we started the web? No. Well, okay, for those of you who forgot, what we explored was noticing something that's always been true. That there is a web of life already holding us, just like that net that held all of those fish that Simon Peter had been fruitlessly trying to catch until Jesus spoke from his boat on the water. The web that I'm talking about isn't something that anyone builds like some long-lost relatives of Spider-Man or precursors. It's not something that we have to enter. It's not something that we work toward or we find our way into. What I'm talking about is something ancient, something responsive and dynamic, something that has been quietly doing its work long before we adorably silly humans thought to give it any of the thousands of names we've given it over the centuries. But today I don't want to talk about what the web of life is or isn't. I want to talk about how it's lived. Because once you know that this web is real, the only honest question left is this: how do I live as someone who knows I am already connected? Right? Or, said another, maybe more fun way, what does it mean? Let me drain the swamp of the frogs. Hold one moment. Better. What does it mean to be a Web-ster? Now, before your mind runs off with spiders and sticky threads, or if you're a Gen Xer like me, into a 1980s TV sitcom starring Emmanuel Lewis, does anyone remember that show? It is no mistake that his name means God with us. No, that's different strokes. Whole different kid. I want to gently clarify what this means here, okay? A Web-ster is not someone who controls the web. It isn't someone who manages it or someone who fixes the broken strands or tells others where they should stand and what they should do. A Web-ster is simply someone who understands that every interaction matters. Every word sends a vibration. Every presence tightens or loosens the whole. And we started learning about that in our first inspirational reading this morning, one of perhaps the most quietly radical teachings in the Bible and one of my favorites, which if you came to our special Christmas Eve candlelight service, you already know. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells a story where people are surprised by their own goodness. He says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And they say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry? When did we see you thirsty? When did we see you lonely or sick or imprisoned?" And the answer comes back not as praise, but as revelation. When you did even the smallest act to one of my sisters and brothers, you did it to me. What you do for another, you do for all of God. They weren't trying to be holy. They weren't performing goodness. They weren't following a checklist of spiritual duties. Wouldn't it be easier if there were such a thing, right? They were simply present. Put another way, you could say that they touched a single strand of the web and the whole web responded. Okay? These next two sentences I'm about to say are really, really important. First, that is not a lesson about charity. Second, it is a lesson about recognition. Why do we reach out to help others? Is it because we feel separate from them and we want to look good? Or is it because at some level we already know that they are not separate and that helping them helps us? I was listening to a contemporary teacher this week who said something that kind of stopped me in my tracks. Some of you may have heard of this man who's about to show up on the screen, Leo Skeppy. He's also called the Mafia Princess. He is a businessman, an inspirational speaker, and a really outspoken social media personality. And he's irreverent and quite intimidating in appearance and energy. And he's also really, really lovable in kind of a fierce Papa Bear way. He's generous and he's kind in ways that can really catch you off guard. And in these last several months, he's inexplicably been pulled to read the Bible all by himself for the very first time. He had lots of reservations. He has had more than his fair share of judgment and hatred spewed toward him by those claiming religious ideals, but he bought a Bible and he's been reading it. He's not asking questions about how someone else interprets it. He's not filling out fields in some Bible study book. He's reading, listening, and drawing his own understanding. This is something that I urge everyone to do. Sit down and read it, cover to cover, using your own mind to take from it whatever truths are meant for you to understand. He opened the video that I'm referencing by saying, "Hello, I fear I've been humbled." He said, "The thing I'm realizing about Jesus is he thinks of everything as part of himself. And that's what love is. I look at evil and fear and things as pushing away, and Jesus pulls everything toward him. That's a loving thing. And intention is what's getting blasted in my face right now. It doesn't matter what action you take, it's the intention behind it." He says, it doesn't matter if you do a good action, and he used air quotes. It doesn't matter if you do the right thing. That's performative. And then he puts on his, probably should be trademark, kind of a tough guy Bronx meets baby accent. And he says, he gestures at the Bible, and he says, "That's frowned upon. You're not supposed to do that." He said, and criticism has got me. It's got me good. The way that I judge people and things. And he went on to give several examples, and he said, and I cleaned this up for church ears. Did I mention he's intimidating? He's a little bit intimidating. And sometimes that shows up in his vocabulary. He said, when you approach someone with judgment, you push them away, even if you're right. And that landed. Because how often do we think the truth must be heard to be effective, must be demonstrated, must be set straight? How often do we think that being correct is the same thing as being helpful? He went on to say something even more important. He said, love doesn't change people by shaming them. It draws them close enough to see clearly. Whole different approach, isn't it? That is Matthew's gospel spoken by a modern man who was completely unaware that he was echoing the original disciple. Truth does not work by pushing. Love does not work by pushing. It works by drawing near. And I want to tell you a story that shows exactly what that looks like in real life. And it has to do with this beautiful statue that you've all been looking at and wondering about up here. This statue was donated by an incredible woman who, thanks to Mona, I am grateful to call a friend. You may have heard of her. Her name is Janie Duncan, and she's kind of a legend around this area. She is the living embodiment of our reading from Matthew this morning, because she feeds and clothes and visits and tends to anyone and everyone in need, no matter what time of day or night. And she's been doing this selflessly for decades. And when Mona brought this in, I reached out to her and I expressed my gratitude. And I said, where did you get that? How did this come to be here? And she told me about her son, Dustin. He was at a gas station one night doing ordinary gas station things, gas station-y stuff. I don't know. I'm imagining that it was just very ordinary. He had no intention of staying there long. He had no intention of making anyone's acquaintance because, gas stations, they're not really known for being hip social spots. Maybe you hadn't noticed. I had. He had no intention of really talking to anybody, no intention of being anyone's answer, but he met a stranger. And instead of leaving, he leaned in. And they talked together. They listened to each other. They both stayed a lot longer than planned. And eventually, the man quietly told him that he had intended to end his life that night. And that thanks to the time he spent with Dustin, he had hope again. And he offered a gift. He opened up the back of his van and pulled out this statue as a gift of gratitude. Nothing dramatic happened from the outside looking in that night, did it? No spiritual intervention brought with a flutter of angel wings. No authority figure in a uniform sweeping in to save the day. No fixing. No public spectacle or huge gesture. It was just presence. Just compassion, just someone willing to stay close enough that hope could breathe again. And at the end of the night, that man gave Dustin this gift, a powerful symbol of what happens when we allow God to work through us, and a powerful teaching tool for our talk this morning. Now, Janie and some other folks say it looks like a Buddha, but I think she's Kuan Yin. And I think it is no coincidence that Kuan Yin is the Chinese goddess of compassion. She will be lacquered and placed by our labyrinth as it is built. And I love that. Because through the gift of Dustin Duncan's heart, compassion didn't remain an idea. It arrived. It took form in him. And the form that was revealed to him will stand at a place where prayers will be answered through the steps of people who walk our sacred pathways. Dustin didn't know he was saving a life. He was just unknowingly being a Web-ster. Which brings me to something that felt like a quiet wink from that web this week, because again, this web that I keep talking about, I also talked about a circle, I talked about a hoop. They're all the same thing. It's always present throughout all time, everywhere, without exception. And I got to feel that intimately yesterday. Now, y'all know that I don't plan these talks out in advance. Okay, I have the titles and topics in place, but nothing concrete. But here's my process. every Saturday. First, I sit down. That is not my process, but I thought it was funny. Because honestly, I don't panic. I know what's going to happen. But isn't that cute? You got panic all the way up until the last minute. No, this is what I do. First, I update the slides for the screen. Behold. And then I kind of backtrack and I go and I plan the readings, right? I pull those together first. And they come together pretty easily because I know my way around the material. But yesterday I was really grasping at straws. I knew sitting down that I wanted to tell you Dustin's story. And I knew I wanted to share that video I saw from Leo Skepi. I knew that I wanted readings that spoke to compassion and service and lived truth. So Matthew was fairly easy to come by. But when I picked up The Science of Mind, nothing quite hit. And I know that book extremely well. So I was kind of frustrated when I couldn't even begin to formulate a thought of a passage I should use. And then I realized that Holmes's wisdom might need to come from another book. So I turned around, because my bookcases are back here when I write. And I turned around and I faced my bookshelf and I pulled the book that spoke to me the loudest. And there are a lot of books there, so it was loud. This is Ernest Holmes at Asilomar, Lectures and Classes from the 1950s. This is a brand new title with information from Ernest Holmes that nobody has heard until just a few years ago. It was copyrighted in 2023, and this is a collection of transcripts of lectures that Ernest gave, which were painstakingly entered in by Reverend Mark Gilbert for the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, whom I'm involved with. And I just got this copy in October when I was at Unity Village visiting the archives. So I held this book in my hand and I sat down and I opened it. And yes, the reading that I wanted was there, but it was in the page after. The big reveal, however, was on the exact page I opened to, page 329. It is a chapter titled Personal Responsibility. And there's that narrow preamble that you're going to see, which explains that this is his last series of talks at Asilomar, and then it gets kind of a broad strokes version of his plan for the week. And then there's a section right below it that reads, "This talk begins following a brief presentation by Ethel Barnhart about opening up an accredited grade school associated with religious science and under the auspices of California Independent Schools. She said that this was part of the cosmic pattern of religious science and part of the very lifeblood of Ernest Holmes." Ethel Barnhart, the founder of this church, the founder of the school on this campus, a woman who understood that spirituality was not meant to float above life, but to educate it and serve it and ground it. That moment felt like touching that filament of incredible stuff connecting us, because today, only we few here know who Ethel Barnhart is and why she's beloved. But somehow, she showed up across the annals of space and time, revealing the web of life, giving us the spiritual punchline of this talk in her own beautifully irreverent way. Sometimes the web of life doesn't just connect people, it connects generations. And that's how this web I talk about endures. Not through fame, not through recognition, but through fidelity. She was, I am. Same place, same teachings, same love. It endures through ordinary people who keep choosing presence over withdrawal. compassion over correctness, love over distance. So here's the invitation today. I am not asking you to be nicer, not to try harder, not to save the world, but simply to notice where you are already part of the web. Where might presence matter more than being right? Where might someone need to be drawn closer rather than set straight? Where have you already been a Web-ster without realizing it? Because here's the quiet truth. We rarely know when we are touching Christ. We rarely know when we are holding someone's hope in our hands unseen. We rarely know when a single moment will ripple outward. But that web of life which connects everything, everywhere, knows. And it responds. We don't strengthen the web by pulling people apart. We strengthen it by drawing them closer. Speak what is true without judgment. Lean in when it would be easier to leave. And trust that the web which has been holding you all along will hold whatever you touch next. Let us pray. We give thanks for the web of life that already holds us, for the love that connects us before we ever reach for it, for the quiet wisdom that reminds us we are never separate, never alone. We affirm that the love we have spoken of today is alive within us now, guiding our words, shaping our choices, and drawing us closer to one another. We know that compassion flows through us naturally, that presence is available in every moment, and that each small act of kindness strengthens the whole. May we go from this place aware of the sacredness of our encounters, willing to lean in where it would be easier to turn away, and ready to live as conscious Web-sters in a world that is already yearning for furthered connection. And we trust that the same love which has carried us here will continue to move through us steadily, faithfully, and without fail. And so it is. Amen.